So, wouldn't you know it, we actually have a little bit of an update on the development of Metroid Prime 4, which you guys know I will cover at every possible turn whenever there is any kind of information out about what's happening with this game. This report is coming to us from our new best friends here on this channel, Video Games Chronicle, also known as VGC, who's broken several stories about Metroid Prime 4 and the development and the behind-the-scenes stuff happening at Retro over the past year, and I've talked about it pretty much every time they've come out with a bit of a scoop. And today they have this other one that has to do also with some folks hired from other teams and other companies within the industry now moving over to Retro Studios to work on Metroid Prime 4. Now, these are the kinds of updates that on the surface might not seem like the biggest news or the biggest deal or the hugest update to what's happening with the game. But if you kind of look below the surface, you actually do usually start to realize that things like this make a pretty big difference. Most notably, VGC also broke the story of the fellow who came from 343 Industries and worked on the last couple of Halo games, coming over as like a character modeler or environmental design for Metroid Prime 4. Somebody who was known for detailing and creating the models for Master Chief in Halo 5, as well as some of the other Spartan soldiers and some of the alien enemies. And that was really good news to think about when you realize that Halo and Metroid, in many ways, not in all ways, but in many ways share some design philosophies, and they're obviously sci-fi shooters featuring an armored protagonist who's just shooting things, whether it's Master Chief with his gun or Samus with her arm cannon, and they share, like, a specific visor design to their helmet and their face. And so, that gives you an idea of the talent and the history of the people coming over to work on Metroid Prime 4, to work on a high-profile Nintendo game. And we don't usually see Nintendo seek out folks with these kinds of graphical and visual and artistic design philosophies on their games. So it's a really cool thing to think about. And so as far as today's update go, there's a couple of people now apparently hired by Retro Studios to work on Metroid Prime 4. So let's take a look at a couple of snippets from VGC's article, and we'll discuss these folks and exactly what could be going on here. So they say in the article, Adad Morales, who previously worked on Battlefield Hardline and the canceled Star Wars Ragtag project at EA's Visceral Studios, has been hired as Retro's new VFX lead. They also add that Brian Irk, who was previously the lead VFX artist for Crystal Dynamics' Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and Nicholas Wilson, who spent 12 years at Borderlands studio Gearbox, have also joined Retro as senior VFX artists. So there we go, 3 very notable hires coming over to Retro Studios to work on Prime 4. Very exciting, and with a wide range of games within their catalogs that they've worked on. From a Star Wars game to Battlefield to Tomb Raider. It's very, very cool stuff. And, all good franchises, all good games. And, you could argue games known for looking pretty darn good, especially on the EA side, because we know Battlefield is using their Frostbite engine. The canceled Star Wars game obviously hurts me to just hear them even reference, but I do remember when Ragtag was a game and they showed like the smallest little gameplay cutscene of what was probably your character walking out of a door or something years ago. So we don't quite know what that was doing, but I think that was maybe also DICE and the Frostbite engine working on that game. I don't know that for sure, and I don't know if it's confirmed. But at the end of the day, we see people coming from Tomb Raider, Star Wars, Battlefield working on these games. And it's incredibly exciting because these kinds of people traditionally have worked at companies and on games making the kinds of visuals and graphics and artistic design decisions that very much differ from what Nintendo does in their games and from what we've seen Retro put into their 3 Metroid Prime games. And while a lot of what this game is going to truly look like will remain a mystery until we actually see it from Nintendo, I do think that it's fair to hypothesize a little bit, knowing that anything else could change behind the scenes. But when you look at the kinds of repertoire that these folks have coming over, as well as Kyle Heffley, who is the name of the guy who came over from 343 from Halo, we're looking at people who could potentially be working on Nintendo's most realistic-looking game. I mean, I wonder if that's what the plan for Metroid Prime 4 is going to be. Part of the reason I also found this stuff interesting, all 3 people are VFX artists and leads and designers from different teams, so they're here for the visuals. That's what they're being hired on for. It's not about the music, it's not about the atmosphere, it's not about the environments, or even necessarily the gameplay, but it's about the visuals. What is the visual language and the visual tone and style of this game, the art itself, the characters themselves. That's what these guys are all being hired to work on. And as I've long said, you guys who've been following me have heard me talk about this numerous times with Metroid Prime 4. I do believe that we will see, whenever this game releases, we will see Nintendo's best looking game. And that's whether it releases on the Switch or, per one of my other potential theories, maybe it releases as a cross-gen or next-gen only game. I mean, this game could potentially be far enough away that it's going to launch on Nintendo's next machine. And if it does so, there's just as much of a chance that it's cross-gen with the Switch that it could also be just exclusive to that outright. I don't really think it's going to be exclusive. I think Nintendo knows they don't want to miss the Switch audience, but I think cross-gen is the best way to go here. Make this the next console's Breath of the Wild. It's good for Metroid as a franchise, it's going to be good for the Switch, and it's going to be good for that next machine. And so I already was anticipating Nintendo's best looking game they ever would have made, and so when you look at the kind of talent and who all these people are and the kinds of visuals that they're used to working on, it's very interesting, and I feel like it's only going to add to that probably being true. I mean, we already think, you think of Battlefield, you think of Star Wars, you understand how those kinds of franchises and visual language translates to Metroid because it's sci-fi, it's shooter-based, that makes sense. Tomb Raider is one of the interesting ones because I think that, apparently this person only worked on Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the most recent one, but they're still very similar across all three of those games. Those are very different games visually, and they're also, third person, which is different than Battlefield being first person and Metroid Prime being first person. That's a unique change, and it's very much about the environments in that game and how you're interacting with it. And, you're mostly outside, but you're also going into caves and temples and things like that. You're going to different little cities and towns and talking to people. So I kind of like the fact that they're very different. It's kind of a wide array of stuff. There are similarities between something like a Battlefield and a Halo you can draw, but I think across the board, you got Star Wars, Halo, Battlefield, Tomb Raider. It's very, very interesting. Oh, and then, of course, even Borderlands, the guy from Gearbox and Borderlands. So, yes, you're dealing with a lot of stuff about shooting. Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a game that will feature a lot of shooting. I know people want to push back on the whole, Metroid Prime is a shooter, not a shooter, adventure, whatever. There's shooting in the game. There's going to be shooting from a first-person perspective at the end of the day, no matter what we think. And I just think that they're going to probably add something really cool and really special to this game. The other element here is this giving us an indication or a sign as to where in the development process they are with this game? That's very hard to say. And as I've had to say in previous videos, I don't develop games, so I don't know at what point in normal development processes you need to hire people like this. And I'm sure that most of you guys also don't develop games. Some of you might. There could be a couple of game developers who kind of stumble across my videos. If you have any idea where in the development process you would hire folks like this would normally be, maybe just let us know. I'd love to hear from your comment below if this is normal for being a year out from a game's release, or if this is normal for being early in production. Maybe we're still 2 or 3 years out, or maybe it's impossible to tell. Maybe they're just replacing people who were working and who had to suddenly leave the project. Tough to say, but at the end of the day, I still find this great news. I find this exciting. We've seen a lot of updates from what Retro is doing behind the scenes over the past, year and a few months since the game was scrapped and restarted and delayed beyond, probably the 2019 release date a lot of us expected it to have. And so, VGC keeps breaking this scoops. They're really paying attention to what's happening with this game and with Retro Studios. I think these are great moves. I was excited when Kyle Heffley from Halo came over, and I'm excited to hear all these guys coming over from their respective studios and their histories within game development as well. I think that it's all coming together to make what I think is going to be a pretty great game as far as Metroid goes. So that's what's going on. That's the quick update with what we've got going on today. Tell me what you guys think about this, my breakdown. How do you see this? What information do you glean from this? How do you think this is going to help the development of the game? And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.